Tonight, we settle into the gentle story of a man whose life touches history in the most unexpected ways. This is the tale of Forrest Gump, a simple man from Alabama who discovers that sometimes the straightest path through life comes from just putting one foot in front of the other. But before we drift into tonight's sleep story, my name's Murphy. If these stories help you relax, feel free to like and subscribe. And if you'd like, share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always beautiful to see people winding down together across the world under the same night sky. Now let's dim the lights and let the story roll. Our story begins on a quiet morning in Savannah, Georgia. The air is warm and still, the kind of southern heat that makes everything move just a little slower. At a bus stop, a man sits alone on a wooden bench. He's wearing a simple suit that's been pressed neatly, though it's not quite stylish. His shoes are clean white running shoes, which seem a bit unusual paired with the suit. A brown suitcase rests beside him, and on his lap he holds a box of chocolates. This man is Forrest Gump. He has kind eyes and a gentle face that carries no trace of worry or hurry. His hair is neat and short, and when he speaks, his voice has the slow, careful rhythm of someone who thinks about each word before saying it. He doesn't look nervous sitting there, even though he's clearly waiting for something important. People come and go at the bus stop. A woman in a nurse's uniform sits down, keeping a polite distance. She doesn't look at Forrest directly, focused instead on waiting for her bus. But Forrest doesn't mind. He's the kind of person who's comfortable with silence, but also comfortable breaking it. After a moment, he turns to the woman and begins to speak. His voice is calm and friendly, like someone sharing a memory with an old friend. He tells her that he's waiting for a bus, too, and that he's going to see someone special. The woman nods politely, but doesn't seem particularly interested in conversation. Forrest doesn't notice or doesn't care about her lack of interest. He opens his box of chocolates and offers her one. She declines with a small shake of her head. Forrest selects one for himself, looking at it thoughtfully before taking a bite. Then, as if the chocolate has reminded him of something important, he begins to tell his story. Before Forrest starts talking, we notice something drifting through the morning air. A white feather floats down from somewhere above, twisting and turning on invisible currents of wind. It moves without purpose or direction, carried along by forces it cannot control. The feather dances past buildings and trees, over cars and people, until finally it settles down right near Forrest's feet. He notices it there and reaches down, picking it up gently. He looks at it for a moment, then carefully tucks it between the pages of a book he's carrying. It's a simple children's book, worn from being handled many times. This small gesture tells us something about Forrest. He's the kind of person who notices small things and keeps them safe. As he settles back on the bench, Forrest begins to tell the nurse about his childhood. His voice takes on a distant quality, as if he's looking backward through time. He tells her about growing up in a small town in Alabama called Greenbow. It's the kind of town where everybody knows everybody, where the summer days stretch long and lazy, and where life moves at its own unhurried pace. Greenbow, Alabama, sits among gentle rolling hills covered in pine trees. The roads are mostly dirt, and the houses are simple but well kept. It's a place where people sit on their porches in the evening, where children play in yards until the fireflies come out. and where the sound of crickets is the music that plays every night. Forrest's home is a large white house with a wide porch that wraps around the front. It's bigger than most houses in town, with enough rooms that his mother can rent some of them out to travelers passing through. The house has the comfortable, lived-in feeling of a place that's been home to many people over many years. Trees shade the yard, and there's always a gentle breeze that makes the curtains flutter in the open windows. His mother runs the boarding house by herself. She's a strong woman, the kind who doesn't need anyone's help, but welcomes company when it comes. Her voice is firm, but loving, and she has a way of saying things that makes them sound both simple and profound. She wears simple dresses and keeps her hair pinned back neatly. When she looks at Forrest, her eyes are full of a fierce, protective love. As a young boy, Forrest has to wear braces on his legs. These braces are made of metal and leather, and they run from his shoes all the way up to his thighs. They're meant to straighten his spine and help him walk properly, but they make moving difficult. The braces creak and click with every step he takes. Other children can run and jump and play freely, but Forrest has to move carefully, his legs stiff and his gait awkward. The braces make him different, and in a small town, being different isn't always easy. But Forrest's mother never treats him like there's anything wrong with him. She tells him that his legs are just a little bit crooked, and that the braces will help make them straight. She says it the same way she might mention that the weather looks like rain. Just a simple fact. Nothing to worry about. Taking Forrest to get fitted for the braces means visiting a doctor in town. The doctor's office smells like medicine and old leather. The doctor is businesslike, professional, measuring Forrest's legs and adjusting the metal frames. He explains to Forrest's mother that the braces will need to be worn for quite some time, maybe years. He speaks as if Forrest isn't in the room, talking about him rather than to him. But Forrest's mother listens patiently, then asks her questions in a way that makes it clear she expects real answers. She wants to know if Forrest will be able to do everything other children do. The doctor hesitates, then says that Forrest will manage, though some activities might be challenging. Forrest's mother nods, satisfied. That's all she needs to hear. When it comes time for Forrest to start school, his mother takes him to meet with the principal. The principal's office is small and stuffy, with papers stacked on the desk and a fan turning slowly in the corner. The principal is a thin man who looks uncomfortable, as if this meeting is something he'd rather not be having. He explains to Forrest's mother that Forrest's intelligence quotient, his IQ, has been tested, and it's below what the school normally requires. The number is 75, and the state requires at least 80 for a child to attend regular public school. The principal suggests that Forrest might be better suited for a special school, a place designed for children who need extra help. Forrest sits quietly during this conversation, his leg braces gleaming in the afternoon light that comes through the window. He doesn't fully understand what the principal is saying, but he can tell from the man's tone that it's not good. He watches his mother's face, trying to read her reaction. His mother's expression doesn't change much, but her voice becomes very calm and very firm. She tells the principal that Forrest is not going to any special school. She says her boy is no different from anyone else, and that he deserves the same opportunities as every other child in Greenbow. She speaks with absolute certainty, as if she's stating a fact that cannot be argued with. The principal shifts in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. He mentions the rules, the state requirements, The concerns about whether Forrest will be able to keep up with the other students. But Forrest's mother isn't interested in excuses. She has a way of looking at people that makes them reconsider their positions. Later that evening, after Forrest has gone to bed, the principal visits their house. Forrest doesn't see this meeting, but he hears the murmur of adult voices downstairs, the creak of floorboards, the sound of the front door opening and closing late at night. By the next morning, everything is settled. Forrest will be allowed to attend the regular public school, starting in the fall. Forrest's mother never tells him exactly what she did or said to change the principal's mind. She simply tells him that he's going to school with all the other children, and that she knows he'll do just fine. She says it with such confidence that Forrest believes her completely. Living with his mother means learning from her every day. She has a special way of explaining the world, using phrases and sayings that stick in Forrest's mind. She tells him these things while they are sitting on the porch in the evening, or while she's cooking dinner, or while they're walking through town together. One of the first things she teaches him is that he's no different from anyone else. She says this often, especially when Forrest has had a hard day, or when he's feeling sad about his leg braces. She tells him that everyone has something that makes life a little harder for them, even if you can't always see it from the outside. Some people have problems with their legs, some people have problems with their thinking, and some people have problems with their hearts. But none of that makes anyone less of a person. She also tells him that his destiny is his own to make. She doesn't believe that people's lives are already written out for them like words in a book. She thinks that every person has to figure out their own purpose, make their own choices, and walk their own path. When she says this, her voice is strong and sure. The saying that Forrest remembers most, though, is about chocolate. His mother tells him that life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. She says this one evening while they're sitting together, and Forrest looks at the box of chocolates on the table, thinking about how each one looks different on the outside, but you can't tell what's inside until you take a bite. Some are sweet, some are nutty. Some have cream inside, and some surprise you with something you weren't expecting. This idea makes sense to Forrest in a way that more complicated explanations might not. Life isn't predictable. You can't always plan for what's coming. Sometimes you just have to take what comes and deal with it the best you can. It's a simple philosophy, but it serves Forrest well throughout his life. When the first day of school arrives, Forrest's mother walks him to the bus stop. He's wearing new clothes and carrying a small lunch pail. The morning is bright and warm, with birds singing in the trees and the smell of honeysuckle hanging in the air. Forrest feels nervous, though he's trying not to show it. The leg braces make him walk slowly, and he's worried about what the other children will think of him. The school bus arrives with a rumble and a squeak of brakes. It's painted yellow and has rows of windows, showing the faces of children already inside. The door opens with a mechanical hiss, and Forrest climbs aboard carefully, one step at a time, his braces making it difficult to navigate the high steps. The bus driver is a woman with a kind face. She greets Forrest warmly and tells him to find a seat. But as Forrest walks down the aisle, looking for an empty spot, he realizes that finding a seat isn't as simple as it sounds. Every time he approaches a row, the children sitting there either look away or tell him that the seat is taken. Some of them stare at his leg braces. Others whisper to each other and giggle. Forrest isn't sure what to do. He keeps walking slowly down the aisle, the bus starting to move while he's still standing. His face grows warm with embarrassment. He's beginning to think he might have to stand for the whole ride when he hears a voice. A small girl with blonde hair looks up at him from her seat. She has bright, curious eyes and a gentle smile. She doesn't look at his braces or seem bothered by them at all. She simply tells him that he can sit with her if he wants to. Her voice is soft and friendly, with no hint of teasing or meanness. Forrest sits down beside her, grateful and relieved. He tells her his name, and she tells him hers, Jenny Curran. She lives with her grandmother not far from Forrest's house, though they've never met before. Jenny has a way of talking that makes Forrest feel comfortable, as if they've been friends for a long time, rather than just meeting. They talk quietly as the bus rolls along the dirt roads toward school. Jenny asks about his braces, but not in a way that makes Forrest feel bad. She just seems curious, wanting to understand. Forrest explains that they're to help his legs grow straight, and Jenny nods as if this makes perfect sense. She tells him about her own life a little bit, though even at this young age, there's a sadness in her voice when she talks about home. From that morning on, Forrest and Jenny become friends. They sit together on the bus every day. They eat lunch together at school. They walk home together in the afternoons when the weather is nice. Jenny never seems to mind that Forrest has to move slowly because of his braces, or that he doesn't always understand things as quickly as other children do. She just accepts him exactly as he is. For Forrest, having Jenny as a friend changes everything. School becomes less frightening. The other children's teasing doesn't hurt as much when Jenny is nearby. She has a way of making the world seem brighter and kinder, like sunlight breaking through clouds. As the weeks and months pass, Forrest settles into the rhythm of school life. He works hard in class, even though many of the lessons are difficult for him. He listens carefully to the teachers and tries his best to remember what they say. Reading is challenging, and math often confuses him. But he never gives up. His mother reminds him every evening that doing his best is all anyone can ask for. But outside of the classroom, Forrest faces a different kind of challenge. There are boys at school who like to pick on children who seem different or weak. These boys notice Forrest's leg braces and his slow, careful way of moving. They notice that he doesn't talk like they do, that his voice is different, that he doesn't always understand their jokes or their games. At first, the teasing is just words. They call him names or laugh at the way he walks. Forrest tries to ignore them, the way his mother has taught him to. He keeps his head down and focuses on getting from one place to another. Jenny often walks with him, and her presence seems to keep the bullies at a distance. They're less brave when there's a witness to their meanness. But one afternoon, the teasing turns into something worse. Forrest is walking home from the bus stop, and Jenny is with him as usual. They're talking about something simple and pleasant, maybe the weather, or something that happened at school that day. The road is quiet and peaceful, lined with trees that cast dappled shadows on the ground. Then they hear the sound of bicycle wheels on gravel. 3 boys from school are riding towards them, pedaling fast and laughing. These are older boys, bigger and stronger, the kind who seem to enjoy making other children scared. When they reach Forrest and Jenny, they don't ride past. Instead, they circle around, their bikes kicking up small clouds of dust. The boys start teasing Forrest, saying cruel things about his braces and the way he walks. One of them suggests that Forrest can't run because his legs don't work right. Another says that Forrest is stupid and shouldn't even be at their school. Forrest stands still, unsure what to do. He's learned that responding to bullies usually just makes things worse. But Jenny gets angry. Her face flushes and her eyes flash, and she tells the boys to leave Forrest alone. She tells them they're being mean and stupid. For a moment, the boys seem surprised by her fierce defense of Forrest. Then they laugh, as if Jenny's anger is just another funny thing. One of the boys reaches out and gives Forrest a shove. It's not hard enough to knock him down, but with the leg braces making his balance uncertain, Forrest stumbles backward. The boys laugh louder, and one of them picks up a small rock and throws it. It hits Forrest's leg brace with a metallic ping. That's when Jenny grabs Forrest's arm and tells him to run. Her voice is urgent and serious. She tells him to run as fast as he can and not to stop. Forrest looks at her, confused. He's never run before. Not really. The braces make running seem impossible. But Jenny isn't asking. She's commanding. She tells him again to run, and there's something in her voice that makes Forrest listen. So he starts moving. At first, it's just a fast walk, his legs stiff in their metal frames. The boys on their bikes follow, riding slowly beside him and laughing, throwing more small rocks. The situation feels scary and confusing, and Forrest's heart is beating fast. He wants to get away, wants to be safe, wants to be home with his mother. And then something changes. Maybe it's the fear, or maybe it's the desire to escape, or maybe it's something that was inside him all along, just waiting to be discovered. Forrest's legs start moving faster. The braces creak and strain, and suddenly, impossibly, he's running. At first, he can barely believe it. His legs are still stiff, still awkward, but they're moving in a way they never have before. Each step comes faster than the last. The boys on the bikes have to pedal harder to keep up. Jenny, watching from where she's standing, has a look of amazement on her face. Then something even more remarkable happens. As Forrest runs, the stress of his movement causes one of the metal bands on his leg brace to break. Then another. The braces start falling apart, pieces of metal and leather dropping away onto the road behind him. It's as if the braces were the only thing holding him back, and now that they're breaking free, his real ability is being released. Forrest runs faster and faster. The boys on the bikes are now pedaling as hard as they can, but they're falling behind. Forrest's legs, free from their metal restraints, move with a fluid, natural speed that surprises everyone, including Forrest himself. He's running like the wind, like he was born to do this, like his legs were never crooked at all. He runs all the way home, not stopping until he reaches his front yard. When he finally slows down and stops, he's breathing hard, and his heart is racing. He looks down at his legs and sees that the braces are completely gone, lost somewhere along the road behind him. His legs look straight and strong. They feel powerful in a way they never have before. His mother comes out onto the porch, attracted by the sound of Forrest's arrival. She sees him standing there, sees the broken pieces of brace that are still hanging from his shoes, and she understands immediately what has happened. Her face breaks into a wide smile. She doesn't seem surprised at all, just proud and happy, as if she always knew this day would come. From that day forward, Forrest can run. He runs faster than anyone else in Greenbow. He runs to school and runs home. He runs for the pure joy of it, for the feeling of his legs moving freely beneath him, for the wind in his face and the ground flying by under his feet. Running becomes as natural to him as breathing. and in many ways it becomes his greatest gift. The years pass quietly in Greenbow. Forrest continues attending school, still struggling with many of his classes, but never giving up. He and Jenny remain close friends, spending their afternoons and weekends together. They explore the woods and creeks around town, sit under trees and talk, or sometimes just enjoy each other's company in comfortable silence. As they grow older, though, their lives begin to take different shapes. Jenny's home life is difficult in ways that she doesn't always talk about. Sometimes Forrest notices that she seems sad or distant, and when he asks her about it, she changes the subject. Other times, she talks about wanting to leave Greenbow someday, to go somewhere far away and become someone different. Forrest doesn't fully understand why she'd want to leave, but he listens when she talks about her dreams. Forrest's life is more stable and peaceful. His mother continues running the boarding house, and Forrest helps her with chores and repairs. He mows the lawn, fixes broken steps, carries heavy things, and does whatever else needs doing. His mother teaches him the value of hard work and responsibility. She tells him that a person's character is measured by how they treat their obligations, no matter how small. Throughout these years, Forrest keeps running. He runs everywhere he goes, not because he has to, but because he loves the feeling of it. He knows every road and path in Greenbow, every shortcut through the woods, every hill and flat stretch. People in town get used to seeing him run past, and they wave or call out greetings. Forrest always waves back, never slowing down. One afternoon when Forrest is in high school, something unexpected happens. He's running home from school as usual, moving at his typical fast pace. The route takes him past the high school football field, where the team is having practice. The boys in their uniforms are running drills, tackling each other, throwing and catching the football. The football coach happens to be watching when Forrest runs by. He's seen Forrest run before, of course. Everyone in town has. But something about seeing him that particular day makes the coach really pay attention. He watches how fast Forrest moves, how his stride is long and smooth, how he doesn't seem to tire even though he's been running for quite a while. The coach blows his whistle and calls out to Forrest, asking him to stop. Forrest, being polite and obedient, does as he's asked. He stands there in his regular clothes, not even breathing hard, while the coach comes over to talk to him. The football players stop their practice to watch, curious about what's happening. The coach asks Forrest if he'd like to try running with a football. Forrest isn't entirely sure what the coach means, but he's willing to try. The coach hands him a football and tells him to run with it to the end of the field. He points to the goal posts in the distance. Forrest takes the football, tucks it under his arm the way he's seen the players do, and starts running. What happens next becomes legendary at that high school. Forrest runs faster than anyone has ever seen a person run on that field. He moves like lightning, his legs pumping, his body leaning forward. The football players, who had been standing around watching, suddenly realize they're supposed to try to stop him. They start running after him, trying to catch him or tackle him. But Forrest is too fast. He reaches the end of the field before any of them get close. The coach is staring with his mouth open. Some of the players are bent over, hands on their knees, trying to catch their breath from their sprint. And Forrest is just standing there, still holding the football, looking around as if wondering what he's supposed to do next. The coach asks Forrest if he'd like to join the football team. Forrest thinks about it for a moment. He doesn't know much about football. The rules are complicated, and he's never really paid attention to sports. But the coach seems excited, and the idea of running with purpose as part of a team appeals to Forrest in a simple way. So Forrest joins the football team. They give him a uniform with pads and a helmet. They try to teach him the plays and strategies, the complex patterns and signals that football players use. Most of this goes over Forrest's head. He finds it difficult to remember which way he's supposed to run or what he's supposed to do when he doesn't have the ball. But the coaches quickly realize that Forrest doesn't need to understand complicated plays. They develop a very simple strategy just for him. Give Forrest the ball and tell him to run towards the goal. That's it. That's the entire plan. And it works beautifully. Forrest becomes the star of the high school football team. During games, the other players hand him the ball and point toward the end zone, and Forrest runs. He runs so fast that opposing teams can't stop him. Players try to tackle him, but he simply outruns them. Coaches try to develop defensive strategies against him, but there's no strategy that works against pure speed. Word of Forrest's remarkable running ability spreads beyond Greenbow. College football scouts start showing up at the high school games, sitting in the bleachers with their notebooks and stopwatches. They time Forrest's runs. They watch how he moves. They talk to the coaches about his character and his work ethic. Several colleges express interest in offering Forrest a scholarship. For a young man with his academic challenges, this kind of opportunity is rare and precious. His mother is thrilled, though she tries not to show too much excitement. She tells Forrest that education is important, and that this is a chance for him to make something of himself. The University of Alabama offers Forrest a full scholarship to play football for their team. Alabama is known for having one of the best college football programs in the country. Their coach, Bear Bryant, is a legend in the sport. For a boy from a small town like Greenbow, this is an enormous opportunity. When the day comes for Forrest to leave for college, his mother helps him pack his belongings into suitcases. She makes sure he has everything he needs: clothes, toiletries, a few personal items from home. She gives him advice about how to behave, how to study hard, how to remember his manners and treat people with respect. Her voice is steady and practical, but Forrest can see that she's emotional about him leaving home. Jenny comes to say goodbye as well. She's happy for Forrest, proud that he's getting this opportunity, but there's sadness in her eyes too. She and Forrest have been friends for so many years, and now their lives are taking them in different directions. She tells him she'll miss him, and Forrest says he'll miss her too. They promise to write letters and stay in touch. The University of Alabama is bigger and more overwhelming than anything Forrest has experienced before. The campus has large brick buildings, wide lawns, and thousands of students walking around with books and backpacks. There are lecture halls that seat hundreds of people, libraries with countless books, and a football stadium that looks enormous and impressive. Forrest moves into a dormitory with other students. His roommate is a regular student, not a football player, who seems a bit uncertain about sharing a room with someone like Forrest. But Forrest is friendly and respectful, and they manage to coexist peacefully enough. The football practices are intense and demanding. Coach Bryant runs a disciplined program where players are expected to work hard every single day. They practice in the Alabama heat, running drills and plays until their bodies are exhausted. For most players, this level of training is brutal, but for Forrest, who loves running more than anything, the practices are actually enjoyable. In the classroom, things are more difficult. College courses are much harder than high school had been, and Forrest struggles to keep up. The professors talk quickly and expect students to understand complex ideas. Forrest sits in the large lecture halls, trying his best to follow along, taking notes that don't always make sense when he reads them later. He spends hours studying in his dorm room, working through textbooks and assignments with fierce determination. But the university provides support for athletes who need academic help. Forrest meets regularly with tutors who help him understand his coursework. They break down the complicated concepts into simpler pieces, explain things multiple times when necessary, and help him prepare for tests. It's a struggle, but Forrest manages to maintain the grades required to keep playing football. On the football field, Forrest becomes a star. When he puts on the crimson uniform of the Alabama Crimson Tide, he transforms into an unstoppable force. The strategy that worked in high school works just as well in college. Give Forrest the ball, point him toward the goal, and let him run. The crowds at Alabama football games are massive, with tens of thousands of people filling the stadium. They cheer and shout, waving flags and signs. When Forrest runs onto the field, the noise is deafening. But Forrest doesn't let the crowd distract him. He focuses on what he needs to do, listening for the coach's instructions, waiting for his chance to run. During games, something almost magical happens. The moment Forrest gets the ball, time seems to slow down for him. He sees the field clearly, sees the gaps between opposing players, sees the path he needs to take. Then he runs, and it's like he's in a different world, moving faster than everyone else, untouchable. He scores touchdown after touchdown. Alabama wins game after game. The sports reporters write articles about the remarkable running back who seems to have appeared out of nowhere. They interview Coach Bryant, who speaks highly of Forrest's dedication and natural ability. They try to interview Forrest too, but he's not comfortable with attention and keeps his answers simple and brief. Alabama's football team is so successful that they attract national attention. Eventually, this leads to an invitation that surprises everyone, including Forrest. The team is invited to the White House in Washington, D.C. to meet President John F. Kennedy. It's an honor, usually reserved for championship teams and extraordinary achievers. The trip to Washington is Forrest's first time leaving Alabama, except for away games. The city is enormous and busy, with wide streets and impressive monuments. The team stays in a hotel and travels together in a bus to the White House. Forrest looks out the windows at the passing scenery, taking in the sights of the nation's capital. The White House is grand and beautiful, with its white columns and manicured lawns. Security guards check everyone carefully before allowing them inside. The interior of the building is elegant, with polished floors and historical paintings on the walls. Forrest and his teammates walk through the halls quietly, on their best behavior, trying not to break anything or cause any disturbance. When they meet President Kennedy, the young president is charming and friendly. He shakes hands with each team member, saying a few words to each one. When he reaches Forrest, they exchange a brief, pleasant conversation. The president asks Forrest how he likes playing football, and Forrest gives simple, honest answers. The president seems amused and impressed by Forrest's straightforward manner. After the ceremony, refreshments are served. There are tables with drinks and fancy foods. Forrest, who has been told to be on his best behavior, is also very thirsty from standing and waiting. He drinks quite a bit, perhaps more than he should. When a White House staff member notices and asks if he needs anything, Forrest politely mentions that he's had a lot to drink. This visit to the White House becomes a memory that Forrest cherishes. He keeps a photograph of himself shaking hands with President Kennedy, and years later, he'll still remember the details of that day with perfect clarity. While Forrest is achieving success at Alabama, Jenny's life takes a much more difficult path. She attends a different college, one that's smaller and less prestigious. She's trying to escape the difficult circumstances of her childhood, trying to reinvent herself and find a new direction. Forrest doesn't see Jenny very often during these years, but they exchange letters occasionally. Jenny's letters are thoughtful and literate, showing her intelligence and creativity. She writes about her classes, about music and books she's discovered, about her dreams of becoming a singer or an actress. But there's also a restlessness in her words, a sense that she's searching for something without quite knowing what it is. On one occasion, Forrest learns that Jenny is performing at a club near her college. The club is the kind of place that college students frequent, informal and a bit rough around the edges. Jenny is singing, accompanying herself on a guitar. She's performing folk songs, the kind of music that's popular among young people who consider themselves artistic and countercultural. Forrest goes to see her perform. He sits in the audience, watching as Jenny takes the stage. She's beautiful and talented, her voice clear and her guitar playing skillful. But the audience isn't particularly respectful. Some people are talking and laughing, not paying attention to the music. Others make inappropriate comments. Then, to Forrest's alarm, some men in the audience start saying rude things to Jenny. They make inappropriate suggestions, speaking loudly enough for Jenny to hear. Jenny tries to keep singing, tries to ignore them, but she's clearly upset and uncomfortable. Forrest can't bear seeing Jenny treated this way. Despite not being someone who typically gets into confrontations, he stands up and starts toward the men who are bothering her. His intention is simply to defend his friend, to make them stop saying cruel things. But the situation escalates quickly. The club's security gets involved, and Forrest ends up being asked to leave. Outside the club, Jenny finds him. She's angry at first, telling him he didn't need to make a scene. But then her anger softens, and she thanks him for trying to protect her. They talk for a while outside under the night sky. Jenny seems sad and troubled, though she doesn't fully explain why. She tells Forrest she's trying to figure out who she is and what she wants from life. Forrest doesn't fully understand Jenny's struggles, but he cares about her deeply. He wants to help, wants to make things better for her, but he doesn't know how. Jenny appreciates his concern, but she also pulls away, telling him she needs to figure things out on her own. Eventually they say goodbye, and Forrest returns to Alabama, feeling worried about his friend. Forrest's years at the University of Alabama pass by more quickly than expected. Between football practices, games, and studying, the days blend together into a blur of activity. Forrest maintains his focus, doing what's expected of him, never complaining about the workload or the pressure. Finally, graduation day arrives. It's a warm spring day, and the ceremony is held outdoors with hundreds of students and their families gathered together. Forrest wears the traditional cap and gown, sitting among his fellow graduates and waiting for his name to be called. When it's his turn, he walks across the stage to receive his diploma. His mother is in the audience, beaming with pride. For a woman who fought so hard to get her son into regular public school, Seeing him graduate from a major university is a moment of tremendous satisfaction. She's proven that her faith in Forrest was justified, that he was capable of achieving things that others doubted he could do. After the ceremony, Forrest stands with his mother for photographs. She tells him how proud she is, how far he's come from the little boy with leg braces. She reminds him that his future is still ahead of him, full of possibilities. Forrest accepts her praise quietly, grateful for everything she's done for him. But now, Forrest faces an uncertain future. His football career at Alabama is over. He needs to decide what comes next in his life. For someone who has always followed instructions and done what others told him to do, making his own decisions about his future is a new kind of challenge. He's not entirely sure what he wants to do or what he's capable of doing outside of running and playing football. His mother offers guidance, as she always has. She tells him that opportunities will present themselves and that he should be ready to recognize them when they come. She reminds him that he's proven himself capable of more than anyone expected, and that this pattern will continue if he keeps working hard and staying true to himself. Not long after graduation, Forrest finds himself in a military recruiting office. The circumstances that lead him there are simple and straightforward, as most things in Forrest's life tend to be. He sees a poster, or perhaps someone suggests it to him, and the idea of serving his country seems like a natural next step. The military, after all, is an organization that tells people exactly what to do and when to do it, something that suits Forrest's way of approaching life. The recruiting officer is friendly and professional. He explains the benefits of military service, talks about the training Forrest will receive, and describes the various opportunities available. Forrest listens carefully, taking in the information. When asked if he has any questions, Forrest's questions are simple and practical. The officer seems pleased with Forrest's respectful demeanor and his apparent eagerness to serve. The paperwork is completed quickly. Forrest takes the required tests, goes through the medical examination, and signs the necessary documents. Within a surprisingly short time, he's enlisted in the United States Army. He's given a date to report for basic training and instructions on what to bring with him. When Forrest tells his mother about his decision, she accepts it with her characteristic strength. She doesn't try to talk him out of it or express excessive worry. Instead, she tells him that she's proud of him for wanting to serve, that he should be careful, and that she'll pray for his safety every day. She helps him prepare for his departure, making sure he has everything he needs. The day Forrest leaves for basic training, his mother walks him to the bus station, just like she walked him to the school bus all those years ago. They don't say much. Neither of them has ever been particularly talkative during emotional moments. But when the bus arrives and it's time for Forrest to board, his mother hugs him tightly and tells him she loves him. Forrest promises to write letters home regularly. The bus takes Forrest to a military base where basic training is conducted. The base is a sprawling facility with simple buildings, training grounds, and hundreds of young men all arriving to begin their military service. Everything is organized and structured, with soldiers in uniform directing the new recruits where to go and what to do. Forrest and the other new recruits are assigned to barracks, long buildings with rows of simple beds. Each recruit gets a footlocker for their belongings and a small area that's theirs to keep neat and orderly. The drill sergeants are loud and demanding, shouting instructions and expecting immediate obedience. For many of the recruits, this harsh treatment is shocking and difficult to adjust to. But Forrest adapts easily to military life. He's accustomed to following instructions without questioning them. When the drill sergeants tell him to run, he runs, and he runs faster than anyone else. When they tell him to do push-ups or sit-ups or any other physical exercise, he does them without complaint. When they tell him to clean his area or shine his boots or prepare his uniform, he does so with careful attention to detail. The physical demands of basic training are intense. The recruits run long distances, carrying heavy packs. They crawl through mud under barbed wire. They climb obstacles and complete exhausting exercises designed to push them to their limits. Many of the recruits struggle with these challenges, but Forrest finds them relatively easy. His years of running and football have prepared him for this kind of physical exertion. In the barracks, Forrest is assigned a bunk. The recruit in the bunk next to his introduces himself right away. His name is Benjamin Buford Blue, but he tells everyone to call him Bubba. Bubba is from Bayou La Batre, Alabama, not far from Greenbow. He has a friendly, open face and a way of talking that immediately makes Forrest feel comfortable. Bubba starts talking to Forrest almost immediately, and he barely stops. He talks while they are getting ready for bed that first night. He talks during meals. He talks during the brief moments of free time they have. But Bubba isn't annoying in his talkativeness. He's genuinely friendly and seems to enjoy having someone to share his thoughts with. Bubba comes from a family that's been in the shrimping business for generations. His mother shrimps, his grandmother shrimped, and his ancestors going back many years were all shrimpers. Bubba knows everything there is to know about shrimp, the different types, where they're found, how they're caught, and most importantly, all the different ways they can be prepared and eaten. Night after night, lying in their bunks after lights out, Bubba talks to Forrest about shrimp. He describes shrimp gumbo, shrimp soup, shrimp stew, shrimp salad, shrimp burgers, shrimp sandwiches, fried shrimp, boiled shrimp, grilled shrimp, barbecued shrimp, shrimp kebabs, shrimp creole, shrimp scampi, shrimp cocktail, and dozens of other preparations. His voice in the darkness is soothing and enthusiastic, painting pictures of his bayou home and the shrimping life he loves. Forrest listens to all of this with genuine interest. He's never thought much about shrimp before, but Bubba's passion is infectious. More than that, Forrest recognizes that he's found a real friend. Bubba doesn't treat Forrest as different or slow. He just treats him as a buddy, someone to talk to and share time with. As the weeks of basic training progress, Bubba begins sharing his dreams with Forrest. He talks about what he wants to do after his military service is complete. His plan is to return to Bayou La Batre and become a shrimping boat captain. He wants to have his own boat, to work for himself, to build a successful shrimping business. Bubba describes this dream in vivid detail. He talks about the kind of boat he wants, a sturdy vessel with good nets and reliable engines. He talks about the waters where the best shrimp can be found, about the rhythms of the seasons and the tides. He talks about hiring a small crew and eventually expanding the operation. His eyes light up when he discusses these plans, and his voice takes on an excited quality. One evening, Bubba makes Forrest an offer. He says that when they both finish their time in the army, Forrest should come work with him on the shrimping boat. He says they could be partners, working together to build the business. Bubba explains that shrimping is hard work, but honest work, and that there's good money to be made if you're willing to put in the effort. Forrest is touched by this offer. The idea of having a clear plan for his future, of having meaningful work to do with a friend, appeals to him greatly. He doesn't know anything about shrimping, But that doesn't seem to matter. Bubba assures him that he'll teach him everything he needs to know. They shake hands on it, making a promise to each other about their future partnership. This promise becomes important to both of them. It gives them something to look forward to, something beyond the immediate challenges of military training. When the physical exercises are exhausting, when the drill sergeants are particularly harsh, when they're homesick or tired or uncertain, they remind each other about the shrimping boat they're going to have someday. Basic training lasts for several weeks, and during that time, Forrest excels in ways that surprise his commanding officers. His physical fitness scores are exceptionally high. His ability to follow orders is perfect. He never questions instructions or hesitates to obey. He's respectful to his superiors and friendly with his fellow recruits. One area where Forrest particularly distinguishes himself is in weapons training. The recruits are taught to assemble, disassemble, clean, and fire various weapons. This requires following precise sequences of steps, and Forrest's ability to memorize and repeat specific procedures serves him well. He can take apart a rifle and put it back together with remarkable speed, his hands moving through the familiar motions without hesitation. On the firing range, Forrest proves to be an excellent marksman. Something about the simplicity of the task, aim at the target, squeeze the trigger steadily, repeat, suits his way of thinking. He doesn't overthink or second-guess himself. He just does what he's been taught to do, and the results speak for themselves. His performance catches the attention of his drill sergeant, who commends him in front of the other recruits. This is rare praise from a man who usually only shouts criticism and demands better effort. The sergeant tells Forrest that he's one of the finest soldiers he's trained, that the army needs more men like him. When basic training concludes, there's a graduation ceremony. The recruits stand in formation in their uniforms, looking much different than they did when they arrived weeks earlier. They've been transformed from civilians into soldiers, taught discipline and skills they didn't have before. Forrest stands beside Bubba, both of them feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. After the ceremony, the soldiers are given brief leave to visit home before their next assignments. Forrest takes the bus back to Greenbow, eager to see his mother and familiar surroundings. The town looks exactly the same as when he left, which is comforting in its own way. His mother greets him with joy, remarking on how strong and healthy he looks in his uniform. During his time home, Forrest tries to visit Jenny. He goes to her grandmother's house, but Jenny isn't there. Her grandmother tells him that Jenny moved away, that she's living somewhere else. Now, trying to pursue her dreams of performing. She doesn't have a specific address or phone number to give him. Forrest is disappointed, but not entirely surprised. Jenny has always talked about leaving Greenbow, and now she finally has. When Forrest's leave ends, he receives his orders. He's being deployed to Vietnam. The war there has been escalating, and more American troops are being sent to fight. For many soldiers, receiving orders to Vietnam means fear and anxiety. They've heard stories about the difficult conditions, the danger, the young men who don't come home. Forrest accepts his orders with his typical calm acceptance. He doesn't fully understand the politics or reasons behind the war. Such complex matters have never been his strength. He simply knows that his country has asked him to serve, and so he will serve. He packs his belongings, says goodbye to his mother once again, and prepares for the long journey across the Pacific Ocean. Bubba receives the same orders, which brings both men some comfort. At least they'll be going to Vietnam together, facing whatever comes as friends. They travel with a large group of soldiers, first by bus to a military airfield, then by plane across the ocean. The flight is long and uncomfortable, with soldiers packed tightly together, trying to sleep in their seats or passing time by talking quietly. When they finally arrive in Vietnam, the heat and humidity hit them immediately. It's different from Alabama heat. Thicker, wetter, more oppressive. The air smells of jet fuel, vegetation, and something else that's harder to identify. The landscape is lush and green, with dense jungle visible in the distance beyond the military base. The base where they're stationed is a sprawling compound of temporary buildings, tents, sandbags, and military equipment. There are soldiers everywhere, some arriving like Forrest and Bubba, others leaving after completing their tours of duty. Some of the departing soldiers look tired and worn, their eyes holding experiences that Forrest can't yet understand. Forrest and Bubba are assigned to an infantry unit. They meet their fellow soldiers, young men from all across America, representing different backgrounds and personalities. Some are friendly and welcoming, others are quiet and keep to themselves. All of them are trying to adjust to being in a war zone, trying to manage their fear and uncertainty. Their commanding officer is Lieutenant Dan Taylor. He's a young officer, probably in his mid-20s, with a strong jawline and intense eyes. Lieutenant Dan comes from a military family. His father served in World War II, and his grandfather served in World War I. Men from the Taylor family have fought in every American war, and Lieutenant Dan carries this legacy with obvious pride. When Lieutenant Dan first addresses his unit, he speaks with confidence and authority. He tells the men that their job is to patrol the jungle, to search for enemy forces, and to survive. He says that if they follow his orders and watch out for each other, he'll do everything in his power to bring them all home safely. His voice carries conviction, and the men listen carefully. Lieutenant Dan has a particular way of carrying himself, a military bearing that comes from years of training and from growing up in a military household. He expects discipline and obedience, but he's not cruel or unreasonable. He seems like the kind of officer who genuinely cares about his men's well-being, who takes his responsibilities seriously. Over the first few days, Lieutenant Dan observes his soldiers, learning their strengths and weaknesses. He notices Forrest's unusual abilities, his speed, his stamina, his perfect obedience to orders. He also notices Forrest's simple way of speaking and his apparent lack of fear. Lieutenant Dan isn't quite sure what to make of Forrest, but he recognizes that having such a capable soldier in his unit is an asset. The unit's assignment is to conduct patrols through the Vietnamese jungle, searching for enemy soldiers and reporting on their movements. These patrols are exhausting and nerve-wracking. The soldiers walk for hours through dense vegetation, carrying heavy packs and weapons, constantly alert for danger. The jungle is unlike anything Forrest has experienced before. The trees and plants grow so thick that sometimes it's difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The ground is uneven and often muddy. Strange sounds echo through the green darkness. Birds calling, insects buzzing, and occasionally sounds that might be animals or might be something more threatening. It rains frequently in Vietnam, sudden downpours that soak everything and turn the paths into streams of mud. The soldiers learn to keep moving even in the rain, their uniforms clinging to their bodies, their boots squelching with each step. When the rain stops, the humidity makes everything feel wet anyway, and nothing ever seems to fully dry. During these patrols, Bubba continues talking about shrimp. It becomes a source of comfort and normalcy in an abnormal situation. While they're walking through the jungle, Bubba quietly describes different shrimp recipes. While they're sitting during breaks, he talks about his plans for their future shrimping business. The other soldiers sometimes smile or roll their eyes at Bubba's constant shrimp talk, but they also find it oddly soothing, a reminder of normal life back home. Forrest walks alongside Bubba, listening and responding occasionally. He's become very good at moving through the jungle. His natural athleticism and stamina mean he never falls behind, never complains about being tired. He carries his weapon carefully and watches the jungle around them the way Lieutenant Dan has taught them to do. The patrols are often uneventful, long days of walking and watching, seeing nothing but jungle and occasionally other American units moving through the area. But the possibility of danger is always present. The soldiers know that enemy forces are somewhere in this vast jungle, and that combat could begin without warning. One afternoon, Forrest's unit is on a patrol deep in the jungle. They're moving through an area that seems quiet and empty. The soldiers are tired from hours of walking, their minds perhaps not as alert as they should be. Lieutenant Dan is at the front of the formation, leading them along what appears to be a safe path. Then, without any warning, the jungle erupts with gunfire. The sound is deafening, shocking in its sudden intensity. Bullets tear through the vegetation, striking trees and sending leaves and bark flying through the air. The soldiers instantly realize they've walked into an ambush. Enemy forces were hidden in the jungle, waiting for them to pass. Everything becomes chaos. Lieutenant Dan is shouting orders, trying to get his men to take cover and return fire. Some soldiers dive behind trees or into small depressions in the ground. Others are hit by the initial barrage of gunfire, their bodies falling before they can even react. Forrest's training takes over. He doesn't freeze or panic. He drops to the ground and starts moving, trying to reach better cover the way he's been taught. Around him, the air is filled with the sounds of warfare. Gunfire, explosions, men shouting. The smell of gunpowder and smoke fills his nostrils. In the confusion, Lieutenant Dan continues trying to organize a response. He's calling out instructions, pointing toward where the enemy fire seems to be coming from. But the ambush is well planned and well executed. The American soldiers are pinned down, unable to advance or retreat safely. Then Lieutenant Dan makes a decision. He orders his men to fall back, to retreat from the killing zone. The soldiers begin moving, trying to withdraw while still returning fire. It's a desperate and dangerous maneuver, with men running through the jungle while bullets fly around them. As the unit retreats, Forrest suddenly realizes that Bubba isn't with him. He looks around frantically, trying to spot his friend in the chaos. Other soldiers are running past him, fleeing the ambush site. Lieutenant Dan is somewhere behind, still trying to cover the withdrawal, but Bubba is nowhere to be seen. Forrest does something that goes against his orders and against common sense. Instead of continuing to retreat with the others, he turns around and runs back towards the ambush site. He runs back into the danger, back towards the enemy fire, searching for Bubba. As he runs through the jungle, Forrest encounters other wounded soldiers from his unit. There's a young man named Dallas, who's been hit and can't walk. Forrest doesn't hesitate. He picks Dallas up, lifting him easily despite the man's weight and gear. He carries him away from the fighting, running at his incredible speed, covering ground faster than most men could run without carrying anything. Forrest deposits Dallas in a safe area, then immediately runs back. He finds another wounded soldier, a man named Cleveland, and carries him to safety as well. Then he goes back again, and again. Each time he ventures back into the danger zone, the situation is more desperate. The enemy fire continues. Explosions shake the ground. The jungle is burning in places where incendiary devices have ignited the vegetation. On one of his trips back, Forrest finds Lieutenant Dan. The lieutenant has been badly wounded, his legs torn apart by enemy fire or an explosion. He's lying on the ground, unable to move, bleeding heavily. When he sees Forrest, he orders him to leave, to save himself. But Forrest ignores the order. He picks up Lieutenant Dan and carries him away from the fighting. Lieutenant Dan is furious. He shouts at Forrest, telling him to put him down, telling him that this isn't how it's supposed to happen. In his delirium and pain, Lieutenant Dan says that he was supposed to die in battle like his ancestors, that it was his destiny. But Forrest doesn't understand or doesn't care about such notions. He just knows that Lieutenant Dan needs help, and so he's helping him. Finally, Forrest finds Bubba. His friend is lying in a clearing, badly wounded. When Forrest reaches him, Bubba is still conscious, but very weak. Forrest picks him up, cradling him carefully, and starts carrying him away from the fighting. He talks to Bubba as he runs, telling him that everything will be okay, that they're going to get him to safety, that they'll still have their shrimping boat someday. Bubba tries to respond. He wants to talk about shrimp one more time, wants to remind Forrest about their plans. His voice is weak, and his words are difficult to understand. Forrest keeps moving, keeps running, desperate to get his friend to help, before it's too late. But Bubba's wounds are too severe. As Forrest carries him through the jungle, he realizes that Bubba has become still and quiet. When he finally stops and looks down at his friend, he sees that Bubba has passed away in his arms. The realization hits Forrest with devastating force. His best friend, the man who talked endlessly about shrimp and made plans for their future together, is gone. Forrest sits there in the jungle, holding Bubba's body, unable to fully process what has happened. Around him, the sounds of combat are beginning to fade as the American forces either retreat or the enemy withdraws. Other soldiers start moving through the area, searching for wounded and collecting the fallen. But for Forrest, everything has become very quiet and very still. During his repeated runs back into the ambush site to save his fellow soldiers, Forrest himself was wounded. In the chaos and adrenaline, he didn't notice it immediately, but he was shot. The bullet hit him in the buttocks, a painful but not immediately life-threatening wound. Only after he stops moving, after Bubba dies in his arms, does Forrest begin to feel the pain and realize he's been injured. Medical personnel arrive at the scene, moving through the aftermath of the ambush to treat the wounded. They find Forrest sitting there, still holding Bubba. They have to gently persuade him to let go of his friend's body. They examine his wound and quickly work to stop the bleeding and stabilize him for transport. Forrest is evacuated along with the other wounded soldiers. They're taken by helicopter to a military hospital. The distinctive sound of the helicopter blades cutting through the air, the sensation of lifting up and away from the jungle below. Forrest looks down at the green landscape receding beneath them, thinking about Bubba, about the promise they made to each other, about the shrimping boat they'll never have together. The hospital is a busy, organized place where doctors and nurses work efficiently to treat the constant flow of wounded soldiers. Forrest's wound requires surgery to remove the bullet and repair the damage. The medical staff tells him that he was fortunate. The wound, while painful and requiring recovery time, hasn't caused permanent damage. He'll heal completely and should have no lasting effects. During his recovery, Forrest has time to think and remember. He thinks about Bubba constantly, replaying their conversations, remembering his friend's enthusiasm and kindness. He thinks about the promise they made to become shrimping partners. Even though Bubba is gone, Forrest finds himself unable to let go of that promise. It becomes something important, something meaningful that he needs to honor. While Forrest is recovering, he learns that Lieutenant Dan is in the same hospital. The lieutenant's injuries were severe. His legs were so badly damaged that they had to be amputated. He's now in a different ward, the one for soldiers with the most serious injuries, going through his own difficult recovery. Forrest decides to visit him. He gets out of his hospital bed, moving carefully because of his own wound, and makes his way through the hospital corridors to find Lieutenant Dan's room. When he enters, he finds his former commanding officer lying in bed, his body ending where his legs should be. Lieutenant Dan's mental state is as wounded as his body. He's angry and bitter, his earlier confidence and pride completely shattered. When he sees Forrest, his reaction isn't gratitude but rage. He lashes out verbally, saying that Forrest shouldn't have saved him, that he was meant to die in that jungle, that it was his destiny to die in combat like his ancestors before him. He tells Forrest that he had his whole life planned out. He was going to die with honor in battle, and that would have been the end of his story, clean and meaningful. Instead, Forrest saved him. And now he's alive but without his legs, facing a future he never wanted and never prepared for. In his pain and despair, Lieutenant Dan sees this as a curse rather than a blessing. Forrest doesn't know what to say to this. He doesn't understand why anyone would want to die, why being alive, even with injuries, wouldn't be better than the alternative. He tries to be friendly and upbeat. Tries to remind Lieutenant Dan that being alive means there's still a future, still possibilities. But Lieutenant Dan doesn't want to hear it. The visit is uncomfortable and sad. Lieutenant Dan's anger pushes Forrest away, making it clear that he doesn't want company or comfort. Forrest eventually leaves, troubled by his former officer's state of mind, but not knowing how to help him. While still recovering in the hospital, Forrest is encouraged to participate in recreational activities as part of his rehabilitation. The hospital has various options for ambulatory patients: games, sports, crafts, and other activities meant to help soldiers pass the time and regain their strength. One day, Forrest wanders into a room where some soldiers are playing ping pong. He's never played the game before, never even paid much attention to it. But someone offers him a paddle and suggests he try. Forrest picks up the paddle and someone explains the basic rules. Hit the ball back and forth over the net. Don't let it bounce more than once on your side. Try to make it difficult for your opponent to return it. The simplicity of ping pong appeals to Forrest in the same way that running and football did. It's a straightforward activity with clear rules and immediate feedback. You either hit the ball successfully or you don't. There's no complex strategy to worry about, no elaborate plays to remember. Forrest starts playing, and something remarkable happens. His hand-eye coordination, which served him so well on the football field, translates perfectly to ping pong. His reflexes are quick, his movements precise. He can track the ball's movement and position his paddle exactly where it needs to be. At first, he plays against other patients, and he wins easily. Then he plays against some of the hospital staff, who are known to be good players, and he beats them too. Word spreads through the hospital about the soldier who's exceptionally good at ping pong. More skilled players come to challenge him, and Forrest defeats them all. What makes Forrest remarkable at ping-pong isn't just his physical ability, but his mental approach. He doesn't get frustrated or anxious. He doesn't overthink his shots or worry about winning or losing. He just watches the ball and hits it again and again with perfect focus and consistency. His opponents often beat themselves through errors or frustration, while Forrest simply continues playing steadily. He practices constantly during his recovery. Whenever he has free time, he's in the recreation room playing ping-pong. The repetitive motion, the rhythmic back and forth of the ball, becomes almost meditative for him. It gives his mind something to focus on besides his memories of the jungle and Bubba's death. As his skill grows, military officials take notice. Ping-pong, it turns out, is more than just a recreational activity. It's a competitive sport with organized tournaments and even international competitions. Someone suggests that Forrest should try playing competitively, representing the military in sporting events. Forrest doesn't particularly care about fame or competition, but he enjoys playing ping-pong, and he's willing to do whatever he's asked to do. So when the opportunity arises to join a military ping-pong team, he agrees without hesitation. Forrest's natural talent and relentless practice transform him into a ping-pong player of exceptional ability. The military enters him in tournaments, first regional competitions, and then increasingly prestigious events. Forrest wins consistently, defeating opponents who have been playing for years, who have trained formally and studied advanced techniques. His style of play isn't flashy or particularly sophisticated. He doesn't use complicated spins or deceptive serves. He simply returns every shot with mechanical precision, never making errors, never losing focus. His opponents often try to outthink him, to use strategy and clever tactics. But these approaches fail against someone who plays with pure, uncomplicated consistency. As Forrest competes in more tournaments, his reputation grows. Sports reporters begin writing articles about the remarkable ping-pong player who emerged from a military hospital. They marvel at his undefeated record, his calm demeanor during matches, his apparent immunity to pressure. Eventually, Forrest's success leads to an extraordinary opportunity. He's selected to represent the United States Army on a ping-pong team that will compete internationally. This is part of a larger diplomatic effort, using sports as a way to build relationships between countries. Ping-pong, particularly, has become associated with what people call ping-pong diplomacy, using the sport to create friendly connections across political divides. The team travels to China, which for American citizens at that time is a rare and significant journey. Relations between the United States and China have been strained for years, and this sporting visit represents an attempt to ease tensions and open dialogue. For Forrest, who doesn't concern himself with politics, it's simply another place to play ping-pong, Forrest Gump. In China, Forrest and his teammates compete against Chinese players in a series of exhibition matches. The events are formal and ceremonial, with dignitaries and officials watching from the audience. Forrest plays as he always does, with complete focus and consistent excellence. He wins his matches, contributing to his team's strong performance. Off the court, Forrest experiences Chinese culture in small ways. The food, the architecture, the glimpses of daily life he sees from buses and hotels. Everything is different from what is known in Alabama and America, but Forrest accepts these differences with his characteristic openness. The ping-pong team's success in China attracts significant attention back in America. The combination of athletic achievement and diplomatic significance makes them newsworthy. and when they return to the United States, they're treated as celebrities. This leads to another invitation to the White House, this time to meet President Richard Nixon. The visit is formal and well publicized. Photographers and reporters are present to document the event. President Nixon personally greets the members of the ping-pong team, shaking hands and offering congratulations. He makes a short speech about the importance of sports diplomacy and the team's contribution to international relations. When Nixon meets Forrest, he's friendly and conversational. He asks Forrest about his experience in China and about playing ping-pong. Forrest answers in his simple, direct way, which seems to amuse the president. Nixon mentions that Forrest must be staying somewhere during his visit to Washington, and Forrest explains that they've been given accommodations. Nixon, in a gesture of hospitality, or perhaps showmanship for the cameras, suggests that Forrest and some other team members should stay in particularly nice accommodations, in a hotel called the Watergate. It's meant as a generous gesture, offering them comfort in an upscale facility. Forrest accepts this graciously, not knowing or caring about the significance of the Watergate name. During his stay at the Watergate Hotel, Forrest has a minor inconvenience. His room overlooks a courtyard or another building, and one night he notices lights on in windows across the way. People seem to be working late, moving around in offices. The lights are bright enough to make it difficult for Forrest to sleep. Being practical and direct, Forrest calls the hotel front desk to report that there are people with flashlights or bright lights across the way, and he wonders if they know it's nighttime, and perhaps they could turn them off so guests can sleep. The front desk person is confused by this call, but says they'll look into it. Forrest doesn't think much more about it, and eventually manages to sleep despite the lights. He doesn't realize that he's inadvertently witnessed something that will later become historically significant. But that's a story that will unfold in ways he'll never fully understand. After his time as a ping-pong champion and minor celebrity, Forrest's military service officially ends. He's honorably discharged and given his veterans' benefits. He returns to Alabama, back to the familiar landscape of his childhood, though now he's a different person than the boy who left, shaped by war, loss, and unexpected experiences. One of the first things Forrest does is visit Bubba's family in Bayou La Batre. He needs to honor the promise he made to his friend, needs to tell Bubba's mother about her son's final moments, needs to somehow make meaning out of the loss. Bayou La Batre is a small coastal community where the economy revolves around shrimping and fishing. The houses are modest, many of them raised on stilts to protect against flooding. Boats line the docks, their nets hanging like massive spider webs. The air smells of salt water and fish. Bubba's mother is a strong, dignified woman who greets Forrest with sad kindness. She invites him into her home, which is simple but clean and welcoming. They sit together, and Forrest tells her about Bubba, about their friendship, about Bubba's constant talk of shrimp, about the promise they made to each other. Mrs. Blue listens quietly, tears running down her face, but her composure maintained. She tells Forrest that she's grateful he was with Bubba at the end, that her son had a true friend with him. She says that Bubba wrote letters home, talking about Forrest, about their plans for the shrimping business. Then Forrest tells her something that surprises both of them as he says it. He tells her that he intends to keep the promise he made to Bubba. He's going to start a shrimping business, just like they planned. He doesn't know anything about shrimping, but Bubba told him enough that he can learn. He wants to honor his friend's dream by making it real. Mrs. Blue is moved by this declaration. She offers to help however she can, to share what she knows about the shrimping business. She tells Forrest that if he's serious about this, he'll need a boat, equipment, and knowledge. It won't be easy, especially for someone with no experience. But if he's truly committed, she'll support him. Forrest uses the money he's saved from his military service and his brief time as a ping-pong celebrity to purchase a shrimping boat. It's not a new or fancy vessel, just a working boat that's seen many years of use but is still seaworthy. The boat needs repairs and updates, needs new nets and equipment. But it's a start. It's real. And it represents the first step toward fulfilling his promise to Bubba. Forrest names the boat Jenny, after the girl who has remained important to him throughout his life, even though he hasn't seen her in years. The name is painted on the boat's side, and when Forrest stands on the dock looking at it, he feels a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride at beginning this venture. Sadness that Bubba isn't here to see it. Learning to operate a shrimping boat proves to be challenging. Forrest has to learn how to navigate coastal waters, how to read weather patterns and tide charts, how to deploy and retrieve shrimping nets, how to sort the catch and keep the shrimp fresh. Mrs. Blue helps him, teaching him the techniques her family has used for generations. Other local shrimpers, many of them skeptical of this newcomer, occasionally offer grudging advice. The work is physically demanding and requires patience that tests even Forrest's considerable determination. Shrimping isn't like running, where success comes from pure speed and effort. It requires understanding the water, knowing where shrimp are likely to be found, timing the tides correctly, and maintaining equipment that constantly needs attention. Forrest's early attempts at shrimping are discouraging. He takes the Jenny out into the Gulf waters, drops his nets in places that seem promising, and waits. When he pulls the nets back up, they're often nearly empty. Just a few shrimp mixed with seaweed, jellyfish, and debris. Other shrimping boats around him seem to be having better luck, their nets coming up full while Forrest's remain stubbornly empty. Days turn into weeks of unsuccessful fishing. Forrest spends his savings on fuel and supplies, going out day after day, casting his nets hopefully, and pulling them back up disappointed. The other shrimpers at the docks start making jokes about the Jenny being cursed, or Forrest being the unluckiest shrimper on the Gulf. But Forrest doesn't give up. He promised Bubba, and he intends to keep that promise no matter how long it takes. One afternoon, Forrest returns to the dock after another unsuccessful day of shrimping. His clothes are soaked with sweat and sea water. His hands are sore from handling the nets, and his spirits are low. As he's tying up the boat, he hears a voice calling his name. Standing on the dock is Lieutenant Dan, but he's changed dramatically from the angry, bitter man Forrest last saw in the hospital. He's in a wheelchair now, his missing legs evident. His face shows the wear of hard times, the look of someone who struggled with anger, alcohol, and purposelessness. His clothes are rumpled, and there's a wild, unkempt quality to his appearance. Lieutenant Dan tells Forrest that he heard about the shrimping business and decided to come see it for himself. His tone is sarcastic and mocking. He makes jokes about Forrest being a shrimping boat captain, implying that it's ridiculous, that Forrest doesn't know what he's doing. He seems to find bitter amusement in the whole situation. But underneath the mockery, there's something else. Lieutenant Dan has been drifting since his injury, unable to find purpose or direction. Despite his harsh words, He's reached out to Forrest because, on some level, Forrest represents something he's lost. A sense of mission, of loyalty, of commitment to something beyond himself. Forrest, in his straightforward way, invites Lieutenant Dan to come work with him on the shrimping boat. He reminds Lieutenant Dan that he promised Bubba they'd be partners in this business, and now Bubba is gone, so he could use a new partner. He says it simply, without pity or awkwardness, just stating a fact. Lieutenant Dan is taken aback by this offer. Part of him wants to refuse, to maintain his bitter independence. But another part of him recognizes that he has nothing else, nowhere else to go, no other purpose waiting for him. After a moment of internal struggle, he accepts, though he does so with sarcastic comments about how they'll probably fail and how ridiculous the whole thing is. Getting Lieutenant Dan onto the shrimping boat requires some adaptation. Forrest helps him transfer from the wheelchair to the deck, and they work out ways for Lieutenant Dan to move around the boat despite his disability. It's awkward at first, and Lieutenant Dan's pride is wounded by needing help, but gradually they establish a working routine. Even with Lieutenant Dan aboard, the shrimping continues to be unsuccessful. They go out day after day, trying different locations, different depths, different times of day. They follow the advice of more experienced shrimpers, trying to learn from observation, but the nets continue coming up mostly empty. Lieutenant Dan's presence adds a new dynamic to these failures. He complains constantly, makes cutting remarks about Forrest's decisions, and expresses doubts about the entire enterprise. He drinks heavily, and sometimes in his drunkenness, he rants about God, fate, and the unfairness of life. He questions why they're bothering with this hopeless venture, why Forrest cares so much about a promise to a dead friend. But despite all his complaints and bitterness, Lieutenant Dan keeps coming back. Every morning, he's at the dock when Forrest arrives, ready to go out again. Something about the routine, the work, the purpose, even if it's not producing results, gives him a reason to keep going. The other shrimpers at the dock continue to mock them. They call the Jenny the unluckiest boat on the Gulf. They make jokes about Forrest and his crippled partner trying to catch shrimp when they clearly don't know what they're doing. Some of the comments are meant good-naturedly, but others carry real meanness. Forrest ignores the teasing as he always has. Lieutenant Dan, however, sometimes responds with angry outbursts, his temper flaring at perceived insults. These confrontations never turn into real fights, but they add to the tension and difficulty of an already challenging situation. Then something happens that changes everything. Weather reports begin warning about a major hurricane approaching the Gulf Coast. It's a powerful storm, and the warnings are serious. All the shrimping boats are being advised to stay in port, or better yet, to move their vessels to safer inland locations. The local shrimpers take these warnings seriously, having lived through storms before. They secure their boats, tie them down with extra lines, and prepare for the hurricane's arrival. Lieutenant Dan, however, has a different reaction to the hurricane warnings. In his current state of mind, bitter, reckless, and feeling like he has nothing to lose, he sees the storm as something else. He sees it as a test, as a confrontation with fate and God, as a chance to challenge the forces that have left him alive and disabled when he wanted to die with honor in Vietnam. As the hurricane approaches, Lieutenant Dan insists that they take the Jenny out to sea. Forrest tries to argue, pointing out that it's dangerous, that they could lose the boat or worse. But Lieutenant Dan is insistent, almost frenzied. He says he wants to face the storm, wants to challenge fate, wants to see if the forces that took his legs will now take the rest of him. Forrest, despite his misgivings, agrees. Partly, this is because he respects Lieutenant Dan and feels he owes him something. Partly, it's because Forrest has never been good at refusing direct requests from authority figures, and Lieutenant Dan was once his commanding officer. And partly, perhaps, Forrest understands on some level that Lieutenant Dan needs this, needs to face something, to fight against something, to rage at the universe that has treated him so cruelly. They take the Jenny out into the Gulf as the hurricane approaches. The sky darkens to an ominous grey-green color. The wind picks up, whipping the water into increasingly rough waves. Other boats are hurrying back to port, their captains looking at the Jenny with disbelief as it heads out into the storm. As the hurricane hits, the sea becomes violent and terrifying. Waves tower over the small, shrimping boat, crashing down with tremendous force. The wind howls, tearing at the rigging and equipment. Rain falls so hard it's difficult to see more than a few feet. The boat pitches and rolls, sometimes climbing up massive waves, sometimes plunging down into deep troughs. Lieutenant Dan lashes himself to the front of the boat, securing himself so he won't be swept overboard, despite his inability to brace with legs. He stands at the front, or rather, he holds himself upright there, and screams into the storm. He challenges God, challenges fate, challenges whatever forces control the universe. He dares the storm to sink them, to finish what started in the Vietnamese jungle. Forrest, meanwhile, struggles to keep the boat afloat and functional. He holds the wheel, fighting to keep the Jenny pointed into the waves rather than letting them catch the boat broadside, which could capsize them. His strength and determination are tested to their limits. Water washes over the deck constantly. The boat creaks and groans, straining against the storm's power. The hurricane rages for hours. It feels endless, like the storm will never pass, like they'll be caught in this nightmare forever. But finally, gradually, the wind begins to ease. The waves become less mountainous. The rain lightens. The worst of the hurricane moves past their location. When morning comes, the Jenny is still afloat. The boat is damaged, equipment torn away, the cabin partially destroyed, nets tangled and broken. But the hull is intact, the engine still works, and miraculously, both Forrest and Lieutenant Dan have survived. As they make their way back toward port in the calm after the storm, they begin to see the hurricane's effect on the other boats. Many of the shrimping vessels that stayed in port or took shelter in the bayous have been damaged by the storm. Some have been torn from their moorings and tossed onto land. Others have been partially sunk or heavily damaged. The docks themselves are littered with debris, and several buildings near the waterfront have been destroyed or damaged. The Jenny, which went out to face the storm directly, has survived in better condition than many boats that tried to shelter from it. It seems impossible, like some kind of miracle. The other shrimpers, when they see Forrest and Lieutenant Dan returning, stare in amazement. The boat they had mocked as cursed and unlucky has survived what many other boats could not. In the days following the hurricane, something else becomes apparent. Many of the shrimping boats have been damaged too badly to operate, at least not immediately. They need repairs, new equipment, time in dry dock. This means there are fewer boats working the Gulf waters, less competition for the available shrimp. The Jenny, despite its damage, is still operational. Forrest and Lieutenant Dan make basic repairs and go back out to try their luck once more. This time, when they pull up their nets, they're full of shrimp. Beautifully full, almost overflowing with shrimp of excellent size and quality. At first, they think it might be a fluke, one lucky catch, but they drop their nets again, and again they come up full. They move to different locations, and everywhere they try, the nets come up heavy with shrimp. It's as if the hurricane has somehow changed their luck, or perhaps the storm disrupted the normal patterns of the Gulf and concentrated the shrimp in ways that benefit them. Day after day, the Jenny brings in massive catches. With fewer boats operating, Forrest and Lieutenant Dan are able to work waters that would normally be crowded with competition. The shrimp processing facilities are desperate for product, since so many boats are out of commission, and they pay good prices for everything the Jenny brings in. The money starts accumulating. What began as a struggling, nearly failing business suddenly becomes successful. Forrest and Lieutenant Dan can afford to repair the Jenny properly, to replace damaged equipment with new gear. They can afford to buy fuel without worrying about whether they'll make enough to cover the cost. Lieutenant Dan's attitude begins to shift. The combination of surviving the hurricane, of facing down the storm and living through it, and the sudden success of the business seems to give him something he's been lacking. Purpose, perhaps, or a sense that his life still has meaning and possibility. He drinks less, complains less, and engages more fully with the work. He also reveals a talent for the business side of shrimping. While Forrest handles the actual work of operating the boat and catching shrimp, Lieutenant Dan starts managing their finances, negotiating with buyers, keeping records. He brings organizational skills and strategic thinking to the enterprise. For the first time since his injury, he has something he's genuinely good at, something valuable to contribute. As the weeks and months pass, the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, which is what Forrest names their business in honor of his promise to Bubba, continues to thrive. They're making enough money that they can consider expanding. Lieutenant Dan suggests buying another boat, hiring a crew, building the business into something larger than just the two of them. Forrest agrees to this, trusting Lieutenant Dan's business judgment. They purchase a second shrimping boat, then a third. They hire experienced shrimpers to captain these vessels, paying them well and treating them fairly. Each boat operates under the Bubba Gump name and contributes to the growing success of the company. Lieutenant Dan proves to have a remarkable talent for business and investment. He doesn't just manage the shrimping company, he starts investing their profits in other ventures. He studies the stock market, learns about different companies and industries, and makes careful, strategic investments. One of his investments, which he doesn't discuss in detail with Forrest, is in a new technology company that makes computers. The company is called Apple, and Lieutenant Dan buys stock in it early, when it's still a small and unproven business. This investment, along with others, begins to grow in value. The Bubba Gump Shrimp Company expands beyond just catching shrimp. They move into processing and distribution, selling directly to restaurants and markets. They develop a reputation for quality and reliability. The company that started as one man's promise to a dead friend becomes a significant business employing dozens of people. Forrest doesn't particularly care about the money or the business success for their own sake. What matters to him is that he's kept his promise to Bubba, that he's made his friend's dream real. The fact that it's become financially successful is almost incidental. A nice bonus, but not the point. As the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company and Lieutenant Dan's investments continue to grow, Forrest finds himself with more money than he ever imagined having. The boy from Greenbow, who never thought much about wealth, has become quite rich. Lieutenant Dan shows him financial statements, and explains how much they're worth, and the numbers are difficult for Forrest to fully comprehend. Lieutenant Dan tells him that he doesn't need to work anymore if he doesn't want to, that he has enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. But Forrest isn't interested in stopping. He enjoys the routine of the shrimping business, enjoys the work. Money doesn't change his simple approach to life. He does use some of the money to buy a house in Greenbow, the same house he grew up in, which his mother still runs as a boarding house. He buys it outright and makes sure his mother doesn't have to work anymore if she doesn't want to. He also sends money to Bubba's mother, making her a partner in the company as he promised, ensuring she's taken care of financially. But then Forrest receives difficult news. His mother has become ill. It's serious, the kind of illness that doctors can't fix with medicine or surgery. She's getting weaker, and it's clear that she doesn't have much time left. Forrest returns to Greenbow to be with her. He stays at the house, helping take care of her, spending time with her in her final weeks. She's still the same strong, wise woman she always was, though her body is failing. She doesn't complain about being sick or express fear about dying. Instead, she uses the time to talk with Forrest about life, to share final thoughts and wisdom. She tells him that she's had a good life, that she's proud of everything he's accomplished. She reminds him that she always knew he was capable of extraordinary things, that his supposed limitations never defined him. She says that life is just a journey, and hers is coming to its natural end, and that's perfectly all right. One evening, sitting in her room with soft light coming through the windows, his mother becomes very peaceful. She tells Forrest that dying is just a part of life, that everyone's time comes eventually. She tells him not to be afraid of it or too sad about it. She tells him she loves him and that she's grateful for having been his mother. That night, quietly and peacefully, she passes away. Forrest sits with her, holding her hand, experiencing the profound sadness of losing the person who has been the most important influence in his life. All the wisdom she shared, all the encouragement she gave, all the time she fought for him and believed in him. These memories are what he's left with now. After his mother's death, Forrest goes through a period of grief and adjustment. The house feels empty without her presence. He maintains the property, keeping everything neat and orderly, the way his mother would have wanted. But he's lonely in ways he hasn't been before. Then one day, unexpectedly, he receives a letter. It's from Jenny. She's heard about his mother's passing. News travels in small communities and through old connections, and she's written to express her condolences. But there's more than just sympathy in her letter. She includes an address where she's living, and she suggests that maybe Forrest could visit if he'd like to see her again. Forrest doesn't hesitate. He's thought about Jenny countless times over the years, wondered where she was and how her life had turned out. Despite everything else that's happened to him, Jenny has remained important, a constant presence in his thoughts even during her physical absence. He travels to the address she provided. It's an apartment in a city, modest and simple, in a neighborhood that's seen better days. Forrest finds the building and climbs the stairs to a floor. He knocks on the door, and when it opens, there she is. Jenny looks older, as everyone does with the passage of years, and there's a tiredness in her eyes that speaks of difficult experiences. But she's still the girl who sat with him on the school bus, who told him to run when the bullies chased him, who accepted him when others didn't. Her smile, when she sees him, is genuine and warm. They stand there for a moment, just looking at each other, both of them emotional about this reunion after so many years apart. Then Jenny invites him inside, and they sit down to talk, to catch up on all the years that have passed since they last saw each other. Jenny tells him about her life, though not in complete detail. She's had a hard time. That much is clear. She tried to pursue her dreams of performing and finding herself, but things didn't work out the way she hoped. She got involved with the wrong people, made choices that she regrets, went down paths that led to pain rather than fulfillment. Her voice carries the weight of these experiences, though she tries to speak lightly about them. She's been working regular jobs, trying to build a stable, normal life after years of instability. She's been getting healthy, both physically and emotionally. Seeing Forrest again, hearing about his life and his success, seems to bring her genuine happiness. She tells him she always knew he was special, that he would do remarkable things. They spend the evening together, talking and remembering. It's comfortable in the way that reunions between old friends can be, with years of separation falling away as they reconnect. Jenny seems happier than she has in a long time, and Forrest is simply glad to be near her again. As the evening ends, Forrest asks if he can see her again, if he can visit, or if she'd like to come to Greenbow sometime. Jenny says yes, that she'd like that. There's a tentative quality to this agreement, as if she's not entirely sure what she wants or what's possible, but she's open to maintaining this reconnection. In the days that follow, Forrest visits Jenny several more times. They spend time together, going for walks, having meals, talking about everything and nothing. For Forrest, these are wonderful days. Having Jenny back in his life feels right, in a way that's difficult to articulate. She's always been the person he cared about most, after his mother, and now she's here. One evening, after they've spent the day together, something shifts between them. The exact details of what happens are private, personal moments that belong to Forrest and Jenny alone. But something changes in their relationship, becomes more intimate, crosses a boundary that had existed between them before. The next morning, Forrest wakes up in Jenny's apartment. He's happy, feeling closer to her than ever before. He imagines that maybe this is the beginning of a new chapter for both of them, that maybe Jenny will be a permanent part of his life, now, in a way she hasn't been before. But when he looks around, Jenny isn't there. He calls her name, searches the small apartment, and gradually realizes that she's gone. She's left early in the morning without waking him, without saying goodbye, without explanation. Forrest is confused and hurt. He doesn't understand why Jenny would leave like this. He waits at the apartment for a while, thinking she might have just gone out for a short time and will return. But hours pass, and she doesn't come back. Eventually, Forrest has to accept that Jenny has left again, just as she's left before at other times in their lives. This pattern of connection and departure, of closeness followed by distance, is something Forrest doesn't fully comprehend. He doesn't understand why Jenny keeps leaving, what she's running from, what she's searching for. He returns to Greenbow, carrying this new sadness with him. He doesn't hear from Jenny after that. No letter, no phone call, no explanation. Once again, she's disappeared from his life, leaving him wondering and waiting. Back in Greenbow, Forrest struggles with feelings he doesn't know how to process. He misses his mother, whose death is still a fresh wound. He's confused and hurt by Jenny's departure. He has wealth and business success, But these things don't bring him the comfort or purpose he needs. He feels unmoored, uncertain, lost in ways that are unfamiliar and uncomfortable. One morning, for no particular reason that he can articulate, Forrest puts on his running shoes and walks out to the end of his driveway. He stands there for a moment, looking down the road that stretches away from his house. Then he starts running. At first, he just runs to the end of the road, to the place where his property meets the wider world. But when he reaches that point, he doesn't stop. He keeps running, moving out onto the county roads that wind through Alabama. He runs past familiar landmarks, past the places of his childhood, running without any destination in mind. He runs for hours that first day, finally stopping when it gets dark. He sleeps under the stars, not bothering to find proper shelter. The next morning, he wakes up and starts running again. He runs east toward the Atlantic Ocean, following roads almost at random, letting his feet carry him forward. Days pass this way. Forrest runs during the daylight hours and rests at night. He doesn't worry about where he's going or why. He just runs because it feels like the right thing to do. Because the act of running gives him a sense of purpose and clarity that he's been missing. The repetitive motion, the physical exertion, the changing scenery, all of these help to quiet the confusion and sadness in his mind. Eventually, after many days of running, Forrest reaches the Atlantic coast. He runs until his feet touch the ocean water, until he can't run any further east. He stands there, catching his breath, looking out at the vast expanse of water stretching to the horizon. He's just accomplished something remarkable, running across a significant portion of the country. But as he stands there, he realizes he doesn't feel finished. The act of running has become important to him, necessary in some way. So after resting briefly, he turns around and starts running west. As Forrest runs back across America, something unexpected begins to happen. People notice him, a man running along highways and back roads, day after day, moving with purpose and determination, attracts attention. At first, it's just a few curious individuals who see him pass by and wonder what he's doing. Someone asks him why he's running, and Forrest gives a simple, honest answer. He just felt like running. This answer, in its simplicity and lack of grand explanation, resonates with people in ways that Forrest doesn't anticipate. Word begins to spread about the running man. News reporters hear about him and come to interview him. They ask him why he's running. Is it for charity? Is it to make a political statement? Is it for a world record? Forrest tells them the truth. He's just running because he feels like it. He's not trying to prove anything or raise awareness about any particular cause. He's just running. This honesty, this lack of ulterior motive, captivates people. In a world where everything seems to have an angle or a purpose, here's a man doing something simply because he wants to, without seeking profit or fame or recognition. People start joining him. At first, it's just one or two individuals who decide to run alongside him for a while. Then more come. Some run with him for a few miles, others for days or weeks. A small crowd of followers begins to accompany Forrest on his journey across America. These followers project their own meanings onto Forrest's run. Some see it as a spiritual journey. Others view it as a protest or a statement about freedom. Some believe Forrest is running toward something, while others think he's running away from something. Everyone has their own interpretation, their own reason for why this matters. Forrest doesn't correct any of these interpretations. When people ask him what his run means, he gives his simple answer. He felt like running. When they try to attribute deeper significance to his journey, he doesn't argue or explain. He just keeps running, letting people believe whatever they want to believe. Forrest's run continues for an extraordinary length of time. He runs across the country, reaches the Pacific Ocean, turns around and runs back to the Atlantic, then turns around again. He crisscrosses America multiple times, covering thousands and thousands of miles. He runs through cities and towns, along highways and rural roads. He runs through different climates and seasons, through summer heat and winter cold, through rain and snow and sunshine. He runs through mountains and deserts, along coastlines and across plains. His appearance changes over the course of this long journey. His beard grows long and unkempt. His hair becomes shaggy. His clothes wear out and are replaced by whatever he can find or what people give him. His body becomes lean and weathered from constant exertion and exposure to the elements. The group of followers grows and changes. Some people stay with him for extended periods, becoming part of a small community that travels with him. Others join for brief moments and then return to their regular lives. The composition of the group is constantly shifting, but there's always someone running with Forrest, always people who have been inspired to join him. Media coverage of Forrest's run becomes extensive. He appears on television news programs, is featured in newspaper and magazine articles, becomes a cultural phenomenon. People speculate endlessly about his motivations and the meaning of his journey. Scholars and commentators offer complex analyses of what the running man represents. Some see him as a symbol of American restlessness and the search for meaning. Others view him as a critique of modern society's obsession with purpose and productivity. Still others interpret his run as a spiritual quest or an expression of grief. These interpretations say more about the interpreters than they do about Forrest, who remained simply himself throughout all of it. Businesses try to capitalize on Forrest's fame. Companies offer him sponsorships, asking him to wear their shoes or clothing, to endorse their products. Forrest declines all of these offers, not out of any principled objection, but because accepting them would complicate the simplicity of what he's doing. He's running, not selling anything or promoting anything. Adding commercial elements would change that. Then one day, after running for what has become 2 years, Forrest stops. He's in the middle of a desert landscape, surrounded by his followers, when he suddenly comes to a halt. Everyone stops with him, waiting to see what he'll do next, wondering if this is just a brief rest. Forrest stands there for a moment, looking around at the landscape, at the people gathered near him. Then he makes an announcement that surprises everyone, including perhaps himself. He says that he's tired, and he thinks he wants to go home now. That's it. That's the only explanation he offers. He's tired, and he wants to go home. After years of running across America, inspiring thousands of people, becoming a cultural icon, and the subject of endless speculation, his journey ends with this simple statement. The followers are stunned. They've been waiting for a profound conclusion, a meaningful endpoint that would explain the entire journey and give it definitive significance. Instead, Forrest is just tired and ready to go home. Some of his followers are disappointed, feeling that the journey should have had a more dramatic or meaningful conclusion. Others are confused, uncertain what to do now that the run is over. But Forrest doesn't owe anyone explanations or grand conclusions. He started running when he felt like it, and now he's stopping, because he doesn't feel like continuing. It's perfectly consistent with how he's always lived his life, doing what feels right in the moment, without needing to justify his choices to others or force them to make sense in any larger framework. He begins the journey back to Alabama, this time as a passenger rather than a runner. The crowd disperses, people returning to their own lives, carrying whatever meaning they've found in the experience. For some, running with Forrest has been transformative. For others, it was just an interesting episode. Either way, it's over now, and everyone must move forward. When Forrest arrives back in Greenbow, he returns to his quiet life in the house where he grew up. The media attention fades quickly once he's no longer running across America. People move on to other stories, other phenomena to analyze and discuss. Forrest doesn't mind this at all. He never wanted the attention in the first place. He settles back into routines. He checks on the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company. Though Lieutenant Dan handles most of the business operations, he maintains the house and property. He lives simply, despite having more money than he could ever spend. The running journey is over, but it served its purpose, whatever that was. Forrest feels more at peace than he has in a long time. Then one day, he receives a letter. The handwriting on the envelope is familiar. It's from Jenny. Forrest's heart beats faster as he opens it, uncertain what the letter might contain after all the years and all the times Jenny has left without explanation. The letter is brief, but significant. Jenny writes that she's been thinking about him, that she's seen him on television during his run across America, that she'd like to see him again if he's willing. She includes an address, a different one from before, and asks him to visit. Forrest doesn't hesitate any more than he did the last time she reached out. Whatever confusion or hurt he felt when she left, he's incapable of holding grudges or nursing resentment. Jenny wants to see him, and that's enough. He prepares to travel to the address she's provided, hopeful, but also guarded, uncertain what this reunion will bring. The address leads Forrest to another apartment, this one in a different city. It's in a quieter neighborhood than where Jenny lived before, in a building that's modest but well-maintained. Forrest climbs the stairs to her floor, carrying the same nervous anticipation he felt during their previous reunion. Jenny opens the door, and Forrest immediately notices that she looks different. She's thinner than before, and there's something fragile about her appearance. But her smile when she sees him is warm and genuine, filled with an emotion that seems deeper than simple happiness at seeing an old friend. She invites him inside, and that's when Forrest sees the child. There's a little boy in the apartment, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, playing with toys on the floor. He looks up when Forrest enters, his eyes curious and bright. Jenny introduces the boy as Forrest, Little Forrest, named after him. And then, gently but directly, she tells Forrest the truth. This is his son. The boy was conceived during that time they spent together years ago, before Jenny left without explanation. The news hits Forrest with tremendous emotional force. He has a son. He's a father. This child, this little person playing on the floor, is his. All the thoughts and feelings this revelation brings are almost too much to process at once. His first question, asked with urgent concern, is whether the boy is like him, whether his son has the same intellectual limitations that Forrest has struggled with throughout his life. It's a question born not of shame, but of worry, of wanting to know what challenges his child might face. Jenny assures him that young Forrest is smart, very smart. She shows Forrest school papers and drawings, evidence of a bright and capable child. Relief and joy wash over Forrest, not because he would have loved his son any less otherwise, but because he knows how difficult life can be for someone who thinks differently than most people. Forrest sits down near his son, watching the boy play. Little Forrest is cautious at first, uncertain about this stranger in his home. But gradually, with Jenny's gentle encouragement, the boy warms up to his father. They start interacting tentatively, Forrest asking simple questions, the boy offering shy answers. As the hours pass, Forrest begins to build a connection with his son. He plays with him, listens to him talk about his favorite things, experiences the strange and wonderful feeling of being a father. It's completely new and somewhat overwhelming, but also deeply right in a way that's hard to articulate. As the day continues and evening approaches, Jenny and Forrest have a chance to talk more privately, while young Forrest is occupied with his toys. It's during this conversation that Jenny reveals more difficult news. She's sick, very sick. The illness is serious and terminal, something that the doctors can't cure. She doesn't give all the specific details, but the implication is clear. Jenny has lived a hard life, made choices that exposed her to risks, and now she's facing the consequences. She's been ill for some time, and the prognosis isn't good. She's telling Forrest this because he deserves to know, and because she needs his help. She wants Forrest to be a part of their son's life. More than that, she wants to know that when she's gone, their son will be taken care of, will have a father who loves him, and will keep him safe. She's asking Forrest to be the parent their son will need, to step into a role he's only just learned exists. Forrest doesn't hesitate in his response. Of course he'll be there for his son. Of course he'll take care of him. The idea of doing anything else doesn't even occur to him. This is his child, and being a good father is simply what one does. It's as clear and simple to him as any decision he's ever made. Jenny is visibly relieved and emotional. She tells Forrest that she always knew he was a good man, that she always knew he would do the right thing. She expresses regret for the times she left him, for not being honest with him earlier about their son, for the choices she made that have led to this point. Her voice carries the weight of these regrets. Forrest tells her that none of that matters now, that what's important is being together now and making sure their son is okay. He doesn't judge her or express anger about the past. He simply accepts the present situation and focuses on what needs to be done going forward. In the weeks that follow, something shifts between Jenny and Forrest. They spend more time together, the three of them becoming a small family in Jenny's quiet apartment. Forrest visits as often as he can, sometimes staying for days at a time. He gets to know his son better, learning the boy's habits and preferences, the way he laughs and what makes him curious. Jenny watches these moments between father and son with a mixture of joy and sadness. She can see the bond forming, can see that she made the right choice in bringing them together. But she also knows her time is growing shorter, that the illness is progressing despite any treatments or medications. One evening, after little Forrest has gone to bed, Jenny asks Forrest if he would marry her. She says it simply, without ceremony or grand gestures. She tells him that she wants to be his wife, that she's always loved him even when she couldn't show it properly, even when she kept running away from the one person who truly cared for her. Forrest doesn't need time to think about his answer. He's loved Jenny since they were children sitting together on that school bus. He's loved her through all the years and all the separations. Of course he'll marry her. Of course he wants to spend whatever time they have left as husband and wife. They arrange a small ceremony back in Greenbow, returning to the place where both of them grew up. It's a quiet wedding, with just a few people present. Lieutenant Dan is there, and a few other friends. Little Forrest stands beside his parents, not fully understanding the significance, but sensing that something important is happening. The ceremony takes place under the trees near Forrest's house, the same house where his mama raised him, where he learned about life and kindness and doing what's right. Jenny wears a simple white dress, and Forrest wears his best suit. They exchange vows in soft voices, promising to care for each other, to be together for as long as they can. After the wedding, Jenny moves into the house with Forrest and their son. For a brief time, they live as a family in the truest sense. Forrest takes care of Jenny as her condition worsens, bringing her meals when she's too weak to come downstairs, sitting with her for hours, holding her hand, and talking about old memories. They reminisce about their childhood, about the times Jenny would sneak away from her troubled home to find safety in Forrest's company. They talk about the moments they shared over the years, the brief reunions that always ended too soon. Jenny tells Forrest that she was afraid for so long, afraid of being loved properly, because she didn't think she deserved it, didn't know how to accept something good after so much bad in her early life. Forrest listens without judgment, stroking her hair gently as she speaks. He tells her that she's always been special to him, always been the most important person in his world. He tells her about all the times he thought of her while he was away in Vietnam, or while he was running across the country, how thoughts of her kept him going, even when things were difficult. Little Forrest adapts to life in the big house, exploring the rooms and the yard, discovering all the places where his father grew up. Forrest takes his son on walks around Greenbow, showing him the school they both attended, the town square, the quiet streets where nothing much ever changes. During these walks, Forrest tells his son stories about his mama, about how she was wise and kind and always knew the right thing to say. He talks about Bubba and their dreams of going into the shrimping business together. He mentions Lieutenant Dan and the journey they shared. He's beginning to pass on his own history to his child, creating a connection between the past and the future. As the days pass, Jenny grows weaker. She spends more time in bed, her energy fading despite Forrest's devoted care. The illness is taking its toll, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. But she seems at peace, surrounded by love in a way she never was during much of her life. She spends her remaining good moments with little Forrest, reading to him, listening to his stories about school and friends, memorizing his face and his voice. She wants to hold on to these details for whatever comes next, wants to carry the image of her son's smile with her. One afternoon, while little Forrest is playing outside and Forrest is sitting beside her bed, Jenny tells him that she's not afraid anymore. She says she's grateful for this time they've had together, for the chance to be a family, however briefly. She asks Forrest to promise that he'll tell their son about her, that he'll make sure the boy knows she loved him more than anything. Forrest promises, his voice thick with emotion. He tells her she's going to be remembered, that their son will grow up knowing about his mother's kindness and her strength, about how she brought them all together in the end. The day comes quietly, without drama or sudden crisis. Jenny simply grows more tired, her breathing becoming shallow and slow. Forrest is with her, holding her hand as he has been for days now. She opens her eyes one last time, looks at him with recognition and love, and then she's gone. The funeral is held a few days later at the spot Jenny always loved when they were young. Forrest has chosen a place under a large tree near a pond, a peaceful location where the sunlight filters through the leaves and everything feels still and calm. It's the kind of place Jenny used to escape to when life at her father's house became too much to bear. The service is simple and brief. A few words are spoken about Jenny's life, about the challenges she faced and the love she ultimately found. Little Forrest stands beside his father, confused and sad, not entirely grasping the permanence of what has happened, but understanding that his mother is gone. After the other attendees have left, Forrest stays by the grave with his son. He talks to Jenny the way he used to talk to his mama after she passed away, telling her about his day, about what little Forrest is learning in school, about how much he misses her. It becomes a habit he'll continue for years to come, visiting this spot regularly to share news and thoughts with the wife he loved for so long. Life continues in the quiet house in Greenbow. Forrest adjusts to being a single father, learning the routines and responsibilities that come with raising a child alone. He makes breakfast every morning, packs lunches for school, helps with homework in the evenings. He attends parent-teacher conferences and school events, always present and attentive. He discovers that being a father comes naturally to him in many ways. The same straightforward approach to life that sometimes made things difficult for him in other contexts serves him well as a parent. He's patient and kind, never losing his temper or becoming frustrated with his son. He teaches through example, showing little Forrest how to be good and honest and caring toward others. The boy thrives under his father's care. He does well in school, making friends, and showing the intelligence that Jenny promised Forrest he possessed. But more than that, he grows up knowing he's loved, knowing he has a father who will always be there for him no matter what. Lieutenant Dan visits sometimes, checking in on Forrest and his son, making sure they have everything they need. The friendship between the two men has deepened over the years into something like brotherhood. Dan has found his own peace and stability, running the business successfully and building a life beyond the anger and bitterness that once consumed him. The Bubba Gump Shrimp Company continues to prosper, providing more than enough money to support Forrest and little Forrest comfortably. But Forrest maintains his simple lifestyle, never needing much beyond the basics. The wealth means security for his son's future, and that's what matters most to him. Forrest takes his son to visit Jenny's grave regularly. They bring flowers and sit for a while, Forrest talking to Jenny about their boy's accomplishments and growth. Little Forrest sometimes asks questions about his mother, wanting to know what she was like, what she enjoyed, how she and his father met. Forrest answers honestly, but gently, sharing the good memories and helping his son understand the complicated person Jenny was. Years pass in this quiet way, Forrest raising his son with the same steady devotion his own mama showed him. Little Forrest grows from a small child into a young boy, ready to start his own journey through the education system that his father once navigated with such difficulty. One morning, Forrest and his son stand at the end of their driveway, waiting for the school bus. It's the first day of school, and little Forrest is wearing new clothes and carrying a backpack filled with supplies. He seems both excited and nervous about this new chapter of his life. Forrest thinks back to his own first day of school, remembering the leg braces and the uncertainty, the way other children stared and made fun. He remembers his mama's strength and the way she prepared him for the challenges ahead. Now he stands in her place, sending his own child off into the world. The yellow school bus appears in the distance, growing larger as it approaches down the quiet road. Forrest kneels down to his son's level, adjusting the boy's backpack and making sure everything is in order. He tells his son to have a good day, to listen to his teacher, to be kind to the other children. Little Forrest looks at his father, perhaps sensing the emotion behind the simple instructions. He asks if he can sit wherever he wants on the bus. Forrest smiles, remembering Jenny's kindness all those years ago, when she made room for him beside her. He tells his son yes, that he can sit anywhere he likes. The bus stops, its door opening with a mechanical hiss. Little Forrest climbs aboard, pausing at the top of the steps to look back at his father. Forrest waves, watching as his son disappears into the interior of the bus to find a seat. As the bus pulls away, Forrest remains standing at the end of the driveway, watching until the vehicle disappears around a distant corner. He sent his son off into a world that will be easier for the boy than it was for him, but still filled with its own challenges and uncertainties. He thinks about his mama and how she prepared him for life with her wisdom and unconditional love. He thinks about Jenny and the complicated path that eventually brought them together as a family. He thinks about all the people and experiences that have shaped his journey from that first day on the school bus to this moment of watching his own son begin the same journey. Forrest walks back towards the house, ready to begin his day. As he moves up the driveway, something catches his attention. A white feather is drifting through the air, floating on an invisible breeze just as one did all those years ago. He watches it dance and swirl, rising and falling on currents of air that carry it across the yard. The feather drifts past him, moving with a kind of grace and randomness that seems to mirror life itself. Sometimes it seems to have direction and purpose, moving decisively in one direction. Other times it simply tumbles and spins at the mercy of forces beyond its control. The feather continues its journey, floating higher into the morning sky. Forrest watches until it becomes too small to see, until it disappears into the blue expanse above. Then he turns and heads back into the house, ready to face whatever comes next. The cycle of life continues in Greenbow, just as it always has. Children grow up and have children of their own. Seasons change, bringing their familiar rhythms of planting and harvest, heat and cold. People are born and people die, and the small town goes on in its quiet way. The story ends where it began, with the image of that floating feather and the understanding that life is both simpler and more complex than we might imagine, that extraordinary things can emerge from ordinary circumstances, and that the greatest achievements might not be the famous deeds, but the quiet acts of love and loyalty that define our relationships with the people who matter most. The end. If you are still awake, try our other movie story videos. Subscribe if you liked the video. Thanks.